Okay, welcome to this debate. This motion is this House will introduce a global carbon tax. Now it's the turn of the first speaker of the proposition team.
My speech will start in 3, 2, 1, now. Carbon should not flow unpriced into the atmosphere any more than you should be allowed to toss your garbage in the street. Bill McKibben, environmentalist and scientist at MIT. Right now, greenhouse gases emissions are accumulating in the atmosphere, causing climate change and resulting in temperature rise. Ice sheet collapse, disruption of ocean circulatory systems, and inundation of low-lying island states, water shortages, and extreme weather conditions. According to a report by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change poses the largest and most pervasive threat to the natural environment and societies the world has ever experienced. Most of the observed climate change is due to human behavior, and we are running out of time. But we can still change the course of our world in order to keep global warming under 1.5 degrees by 2100 and avoid more disastrous effects. However, as stated by the Climate Action Tracker, current policies are nowhere near enough. At this rate, the world's average temperatures will rise by 2.9 degrees. But why are we moving forward to a point of no return? Because the current policies adopted are not efficient. These actions are very liberal. In the emblematic and well-known Paris agreements, the states aren't punished for not doing enough. These facts aren't minded. The status quo is not working. We have treated some of the symptoms but not cured the patient from its fever, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said in a short reaction to a statement failure of COP27. In this framework, as claimed by the 2022 Emissions Gap Report, climate crisis calls for a stricter, urgent system-wide transformation through policies capable of tackling it appropriately and effectively. According to our team, the best solution is a global carbon tax, a price levied on coal, oil products, natural gas in proportion to their carbon content paid by fuel suppliers and businesses, as a reflection of consequent higher prices for electricity, gasoline, heating oil, as well as for the products and services that depend on them. So, why is our solution the best one? Because looking at the European carbon tax system that started in 2019, there has been a year-on-year reduction in emissions with a 14% reduction in electricity and heat production and a 1.9% reduction in industry. We can only solve this issue globally, and we'll also later on explain this better. It is the extension of something that already exists and works at a local scale. It has global and support, and a global carbon tax has been advocated by heads of international organizations and many politicians by making producers and consumers aware of the environmental impact of their choices. So, how will this work? Our proposal of global carbon tax is based on a real, operative, effective model, Canada's one, where a minimum carbon price is established federally and every province must face it in accordance to their economic development and also consume. This approach is flexible and adequate to heterogeneous realities. But how could this type of taxation be expanded on a global scale? This model of operation can be expanded globally, like had already happened with the global minimum tax, a tax on big companies, basically tightening of tax avoidance. But how will this apply? The large emitting group of 20 and other willing countries should gather, establish a differentiated $35 to $70 ton carbon tax, to which every country should gradually adjust in accordance to their capacities. But how are the roles of the single nations and the group of 20s? The revenues and the payment itself is overseen by the nations. The role that the group of 20 covers is that everything proceeds as agreed, so as not to repeat what happened in previous COPs, where if you did not respect them, there was no consequence at all. Therefore, they were very unaffected. So where will this tax be applied? The tax will be applied during the production of the goods, therefore on companies. So the goods or services with a higher carbon impact will have a higher price. And this will shift the consumer's attitude to either consume lower carbon or to choose new renewable energy sources. So what can we do with the revenues from the carbon tax? Parts of the revenues will be addressed to lower income families and smaller companies to help them financially. Of course, parts of the revenue would also be directed for investments in green infrastructures for developing countries and developed countries if they need it. And finally, there will also be incentives for families and companies to ease the tax burden on profits and avoid price increase with the risk of inflation. So, believing in the fight against climate change and the possibility of saving ourselves and the world, we are going to show you that our global carbon tax is necessary, beneficial to everyone, and the only and most effective solution to today's challenges through 3 arguments. The first one is that the global carbon tax saves the environment. The second, that will be explained along with the third one by our second speaker. The second one is that it benefits global politics to reducing discipline policies. And the third one is that it helps all the countries' economies. So, moving on to explain my first argument. A global carbon tax is the only effective way to save the environment in contrast with the action taken so far. Before we dive into the problem, it's crucial to understand how and why the COP21 failed. The COP21 failed because the world's largest polluters were unable to agree on stronger plans to curb their emissions. And every COP since then has been a failure as well. Basically, the Paris Agreements are not compulsory, and if you do not respect them, there is no consequence at all. Therefore, they are very ineffective. Knowing this, it's easy to understand why we need a stronger plan to save the environment.
Yeah. And don't you think that if they didn't agree on these COPs, they won't agree on global tax?
No, because the global tax will be chosen with everyone, and the group of Chinese, they will it will be discussed among everyone, every country. So let's see why a global carbon tax is an effective way to save the environment. First of all, a global carbon tax will encourage the reduction of carbon emissions. A carbon tax will make it more expensive to produce goods and services that emit carbon dioxide. This will encourage individuals, businesses, and governments to reduce their carbon footprint by using cleaner, more energy-efficient technologies, and they will encourage individuals and businesses to reduce their carbon footprint by taking measures to decrease their carbon emissions. Like I just stated, the tax will create a financial incentive for industries to invest in cleaner technologies and to implement sustainable practices, but also to fund environmental projects such as reforestation and wildlife conservation. So, a global carbon tax will also provide a significant incentive for businesses to reduce their carbon footprint. As the higher the carbon emissions, the higher the tax will be. Therefore, persuading companies to adopt cleaner technologies, leading to a sustainable and cleaner global economy. Overall, a carbon tax will play an important role in reducing greenhouse gases and mitigating the detrimental effects of climate change on the planet. Secondly, a global carbon tax will serve as a solution to one of the key weaknesses of the existing international legal framework for climate mitigation, namely the risk of carbon leakage. Carbon leakage takes place when a country's climate policies leads to higher levels of greenhouse gas emissions in other countries. It can be caused by the relocation of domestic enterprises that move their production activity to other countries. The traditional tool used by countries to mitigate the risk has been CBAMAs, which impose a carbon price on importers and of a selection of carbon-intensive imported products. A global carbon tax will render preferential regimes as CBAMAs unnecessary. If all countries agree on a uniform carbon footprint, carbon leakage risk will be eliminated. And for this reason, and all this is the reasons previously stated, we believe that a global carbon tax is necessary. Thank you.
8 minutes, 23 seconds. Take your time.
Sorry.
No problem.
I'm going to start my speech. 3, 2, 1. Good morning, everyone. I'm Alessandra Farina, and today we are in a debate about introducing or not a global carbon tax. I'm going to divide my speech in 2 parts. I'm going to refute what the other team has said, and then I'm going to present our main arguments. First of all, We agree with your context about how urgent it is to find a solution to climate change and general pollution, but we do not agree with your proposed solution. In fact, you propose a global carbon tax, and you said that considering it's already working in some local scale, will work in a global one. And you bring the example of Canada. Canada has already a good economy and it works maybe in a local scale. But there are other examples, for example, Australia, that tried to apply a global carbon tax and this didn't work. In fact, they eliminated it. So this shows how it is hard to actually mix all the interest and fiscal diversities to find actually a global solution. So you propose, no thank you. You propose a model in which there is a minimum sum to pay and then everybody could add more. But actually you are presenting an utopic situation. In fact, first of all, you are assuming that even if we didn't agree on many things, and I'll show you what things, everybody will agree on this accord and sign this global carbon tax. And also you are assuming that with a minimum, there are going to be states that are going to pay more, even if it's not required. So it's quite utopic. And then my teammate is going to bring the upstream taxation that you presented and the fiscal neutrality because they are main points of our arguments. I would like to proceed with our team line, our main arguments. Our team argues that the introduction of a global carbon tax is a solution impossible to apply in the short term, not sustainable for many national economies, and ineffective. So we propose a control model or an integrated hybrid system, which starts from the effectiveness demonstrated by European emission trade system, with the system of banking and emission permits with local integration of the border and carbon tax adjustment to solve the risk of a carbon leakage. So we are going to present to you the limits and the cost of a global carbon tax and instead the effectiveness of our model. To do that, we are going to use three main arguments. I'm going to discuss the first one, that is about the inactuability of a global carbon tax. This is due to the diversity of interests and conditions of the countries. And then the second speaker will present the other two arguments about the global carbon tax is not sustainable for national economies or taxpayers in terms of number and social stability. And then the application of a global carbon tax that does not set a certain emission target. So it would be not useful as our model about the goal that you presented about reducing the emissions. So I'm going to cover the first argument. Two different are the economic interests of countries that are already involved in the climate accords. As you said, you mentioned COP21, but there are many examples of that. So if they weren't able to find an agreement on zero emission and loss and damage that I'm going to explain later, how we can think about them find an agreement about a carbon tax that should cover.
Right.
Yes?
Are you aware of the fact that the problem of the Paris agreements are not the accord themselves, but the fact that there were no consequences for the one that didn't portray these actions?
Thank you for your seeing the matter in this way, you are not presenting a system that actually controls. You are not you didn't present a solution to that because you didn't say what would happen precisely to the countries that didn't respect this law, and instead you are also assuming that there is a way to control the respecting these accords, and we think it's very hard. So the system, I would say that the global carbon tax should agree on rates, the taxable amount, and how they are going to be used. So there are many things that should be agreed on. And there is an example about COP26 when the countries should have agreed on a date to not go up the 2 degrees level of orientation temperatures. But countries like China, Russia, and Saudi Arabia didn't agree on 2050 and pushed to 2060, while India pushed to 2070. So they weren't able to find an agreement just on the date. Just even imagine how hard it would be to agree on all the things that compose global carbon. And also there is the problem of loss and damage. What is loss and damage? It's the potential negative impact or in particularly vulnerable developing countries. So there is a lack of official definitions since the 90s. So there is a really big dilemma about the concept of compensations, because there are two main points. The developing countries are asking to be compensated with a compensation mechanism, but the developed country do not want to compensate or even assume responsibility. So we see how hard it is to actually meet all the needs of the different states. Since the Kyoto agreements, it has been more feasible to opt for a cap and trade system because it does not require unanimity. That is the problem that I present to you. So what is cap and trade system? I'm going to explain that using the example of the emission trading scheme used in Europe. So a cap is a number to correspond in which allowances can be sold and purchased on the market. So there is how you can actually pollute. This has a double advantage. First of all, there is a maximum level of emissions that will be reduced over time, because in our arguments we're going to show you then how global carbon tax does not fix that, while with a cap and trade system you have a maximum level and it's going to decrease. That is our main goal. And then creates a real commercial space where the allowances can be used can be sold and acquired to compensate their emissions on the annual time. So the quotas can be allocated with two methods. First of all, for considerations, while the public authorities accredit the subjects, and then with free of charge, when there are cases in which the companies can take in as a reference the virtuous plans the company presented. So the system that we support of mandatory emission trading is based on the European model and can be feasible to extend to other countries because, for example, there is a connection between this and the Chinese ATC, so emission trading system. A global carbon tax indeed will create economic balances, and countries like Ethiopia, Brazil, and Switzerland would be more competitive and attractive, while countries like USA, Japan, Italy, and Great Britain, just to make some examples, will be disadvantages. So we'll actually change the balance of geopolitical situation today. So I'm going to quote Ian Perry, that is a fiscal analysis, that said that only with China, EU, India, and US making an agreement, so less people, it's easier to make an agreement, there will be about 65% of global emission reducing. So we have presented you why our control model with cap and trade system is going to be more effective. Thank you, everybody.
8 minutes, 9 seconds. Ready to start?
Just a second. Okay, I will start my speech in 3, 2, 1. I want to start by repeating what the opposition team said, and then I will explain the other two reasons why we strongly believe that a global taxation, a global carbon tax is needed. So, first of all, their first argument is about the inactability of global carbon tax. And as a proof of that, they said that this tax wouldn't be equal, and it wouldn't meet all the needs of the countries that would be into it. But I want to state again what our model is, and it is a model that adapts to each and every economy of the ones that will get into it. And this is why it's so convenient for each one of them, and it is also my third argument, this convenience for both developing countries and developed countries. This is because for each country there is a number, a monetary number of the payment they should do for the tons that goes in a range of 35 to 75. So this makes the matters fair, not equal but fair.
Yeah.
No, thank you. Moreover, they stated that countries that are more developed wouldn't want to accept their accountability. But this is not true because, for example, Canada is already using a system, a model. So this proves that they are already acknowledging the problem. Other than that, their model that is similar to the ATS, the present ATS of China, for example, they stated that they would change the balances of the world, like making the countries that now have the monopolies less strong than the countries that would instead improve. And I'm asking the opposition team, why do you think these countries would want to do that? Why do you think these countries should adopt your model if, yes?
Are you aware that I said a global carbon tax is going to change a lot of economic imbalances and not a cap and trade system?
But your model would also change the balances because the countries that have would buy those things would gain so many more money. So it's the same if you see it that way. It's exactly the same thing, except our model is better for both developed economies and developing economies.
Eli?
No, thank you. So going on with our second argument, a global carbon tax will level out inequalities between nations and global politics in general. And this is a point that we strongly believe in because a few countries have low carbon tax now, and the situation is neither fair nor equal. The global carbon tax is fair and not equal. And with fairness, we mean treating people according to their needs, as our model substains. This does not always mean it will be equal, because equality means making things exactly the same for everybody, and it's not what we want. This fairness can lead to the absence of extreme competitiveness between nations. Why? Because if the nations are treated equally, this will strain the relations. If India and the USA had to pay the same amount of money, this will make India less competitive and disrupting their economy, making big companies even more predominant on the economy. Instead, if they were treated fairly, there would be no extreme economic competition, and this would create a better ground to create international political relations between those countries. As an example, a global tax already exists, and it is working, and it is increasing, and more countries are contributing to it, and it is the global minimum corporate tax, and this is an example of fairness that is already bringing countries together. Furthermore, this model would level the playing ground for the countries, because since it's fair and not equal, they would instead of having unequal countries, we would have an equal level ground for all. So the economy will keep going in a fair way, not in the current manner of things. What is the impact of this? As I stated, thanks to our model, a global carbon tax will benefit global politics because it will mend social and political relationships between nations due to its fairness. Let's move on to our third argument, which is a global carbon tax will help the economy of both developing countries and developed countries. For what regards developing countries, this tax will direct companies that have an informal economy, that we'll explain, toward a formal one. And second of all, it is a future-proof investment and it avoids energetic transition costs that are really high. So, this carbon tax would also help to tackle the high levels of informal economy. In fact, the 70% of developing countries' economy is informal, which means it is not exposed to taxes, it is not exposed to the monetary system like it is the formal one. And in an economy with substantial informality, a global carbon tax can produce fiscal co-benefits that improve economic performance, in addition in reducing carbon dioxide, that as we can see is the main goal of this tax. But why does it reduce informal economy? Because, as we stated, the revenues that will be collected will go back to the countries, and this would create some benefits for the low-income countries that actually need these benefits to improve their economy, and to low-income families. So the companies that were informal in these low-income countries would want to shift to formal because it's convenient, because they gain money from that, and this will better the economic of the world in general. The study conducted by the WBC confirms this data that I'm bringing to you. What will be the impact of reducing informality? First of all, it will lead to a domestic economy and it will expand the country's economy. As we stated, leveling the ground. Carbon taxes also permit trading, encourage cleaner investments. So the countries that, for example, Ghana, Uganda, Ecuador, that don't have a carbon dioxide-based economy, can have the chance to directly shift, to directly go to a sustainable economy. And this is something that we highly want to keep going and to not fall again in the toxicity of an economy based on the emissions. But now let's see the benefits for the developed countries. So first of all, this will drive innovation in low carbon technologies, and the developed countries will have a competitive advantage if compared to the not developed one, because they already have the money to have these technologies. So we can say that the developing countries or the developed countries would have a higher chance of getting into this economy, because they both would have funds. So this is good. And also they level the playing field, reducing the potential of carbon leakage, because if all the countries have a carbon have a carbon tax, simply having some other centers in other countries will not be efficient and will not be convenient for the countries. So because of all these reasons and because of all these data that we brought you, we think that a global carbon tax is needed, and it's globally really, really good. Thank you for your attention.
Okay. 8:31. Ready?
Yes.
I'm going to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Good morning, everybody. My name is Mary, and today we're debating about the motion this House would introduce a global carbon tax. So I'd like to first of all refutate the battle for your statements. So as a refutation for our first model argumentation, you brought the fact that the model adapts to each economy. But we are asking you, why should China, a country that is developing so fast during this country, during these years, increase its carbon tax from another country? What is the economical advantages of this? Second of all, you brought as an economic theory. You also said that our model would change the balances as yours, but you didn't bring data about how it would. Your second argumentation was about political relations that would increase. But first of all, in my argumentation, I will tell you why your model brings an upstream carbon tax put on the ones who produce the products with carbon would only enlarge the gap between developing countries and developed one, and disadvantage the developing one, causing climate justice. But we're going to see it later.
POI?
No, thank you. Third argument, it helps economies of all countries, because first of all, you say that this reduces CO2, but if you have a fiscal neutrality and people get back the money that they use for buying CO2 products, how can the demand of these products decrease? Then you said that in the low-income countries, they would benefit because they take money from the tax, but they are basically taking money from a sector that could be developed, that is the production of products with CO2. So there is no advantages from that. Then it also helps the developing countries, according to your position, because it encourages new green technologies. But you didn't bring us a model in which there is a fund or there is yes,
There is a fund, it's the revenues.
yes, but you didn't bring us a model in which you didn't tell us that this would lead to the investment of new green technologies. Me, as a state, could not join the agreements. I could not decide why should the countries
develop new green technologies. There are a lot of countries that with COP21 that you also brought did not take into consideration their main goals because it wasn't in their interest, the save of the environment. You also talked about free riding, and you also talked about the fact that your model would avoid free riding, that is, countries going in other countries to produce there. But this is what we are saying. This is the problem of our model. If a country such as Italy has a high carbon tax, me as an Italian entrepreneur will go in India where the carbon tax is lower to produce. So it will only encourage this system that you brought as a problem. Now moving on to my first argumentations. The implementation of taxation system is not sustainable for many national economies and social acceptability. Unlike cap and trade systems, they are more feasible and effective. First of all, I'm going to structure this argumentation in 3 main points. There are 4 points. There are many choices that have to be done together and can't be done together, because we have to decide which fuels to tax and then what is the level of the carbon tax. That the US said that could vary, but the first speaker said, why should I increase my carbon tax compared to the ones of other countries? So it is impossible to make a global carbon tax that everyone agrees on. Then it requires political decision making to define the level, but also these levels can be wrong because the optimization of them in some countries would not be the same in other countries. On one other side, we see cap and trade that minimize the number of political decisions that are made between the states and gives free action to each state to adapt, to make the system adapt to their economies. Second point of problem with your model is the acceptability. You said that the carbon tax is accepted in countries such as Canada, but you didn't bring us examples such as Australia, France, Chile, that are all countries that have introduced a carbon tax, but because of political misunderstandings and poor communication, the population revolted against it. You brought us a solution to this fiscal neutrality by demonstrating you that fiscal neutrality is not the solution, because if people get paid back, then the demand of CO2 products want to decrease. Then, even if we want to accept this point, I wanted to underline that the demand of energy resources coming from CO2 is inelastic. So, in the short term, consumers cannot immediately change energetic habits, and we are seeing it right now. The price of energy is increasing, but we are not changing our habits because cars that go by fossil fuels made by energy cannot be replaced immediately. Then global carbon tax, third point, global carbon tax poses problems with climate justice. You brought the fact that it would be upstream, but the economic professor Piketty finds a problem. In emerging countries, emission from production activities exceeds the emission from consumption. So with your model, you say that developing countries would benefit, but they not, because they produce they are producing for more than what they are using. So it would cause climate injustice. Then moving on to my third argument, the application of a global carbon tax doesn't set certain emission targets, starting point of cap, this is the starting point of the cap and trade, and proves less effective for the net zero. A carbon tax is a price instrument, so you didn't bring us data that ensure us that in the future the demand of CO2 products will decrease. Cap and trade, on the other side, we have a lot of in terms of government, internet, no thank you. We have a lot of organizations such as the IPCC that calculated what is the right amount of CO2 that has to be put as a limitation on each nation to reach the net zero by 2050. This model is already used in many countries such as the European Union Commission, China, and all the limitations such as the quotas that cannot be reused are resolved by solutions such as banking. It is the possibility of accumulating credits, or other promises such as the
protection of national economies from other nations who sell products without a global carbon tax, that was a problem of your model, the fact of dislocating industries, is resolved in our model by the global carbon pricing, that is applying a corrective price to imports based on their carbon context. So the national economy of each state won't be affected from our point of view. In your model, it will be, because we will have free riding. So I'm demonstrating you that we should not introduce a global carbon tax while we should follow our system, because it imposes to coordinate, it is impossible to coordinate as a system. It wouldn't be supported by the population and create climate injustice, and then because our model, cap and trade, is most efficient to reach the net zero, the problem that you have brought as the first speaker. Thank you for your attention.
816. Okay. You want to start?
Yes. I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1, now. The reason why we should do a global carbon tax is because it's the right thing to do. It's economics 101, elementary stuff, Elon Musk. Good morning, everyone. I'm the third speaker of the proposition team, and the first question to which I want to answer is, do we really need a global carbon tax? The answer, obviously, is yes. Why? Because the current policies adopted until now are not efficient, and we brought data to you about why these are not efficient, and I will explain this later on. All the measures taken so far, so to put it at best, are superficial. So how can we expect countries to act if there's no consequences when they don't? Therefore, what we need now is a strong plan that has consequences and that also have the one who are financially disrupted by the environmental problem. Therefore, it's not a want anymore, it's a need. Now, I would like to divide my rebuttal speech in 3 main points. I would like to talk about our model in regard of the economy. The second point will be the agreement, and the third and final point, the fairness in regard of politics issues. I will start by talking about our model in regard of the economic problems. It's easy to understand how they didn't comprehend our model would work, because we said that our model is fair and also it's based on a real one and effective model that it is working. So our model works this way. There is a group of 20 that will oversee all the action, but they will not they will not be the direct incomers of the profiters of this global carbon tax, because the one that will profit from this global carbon tax are the one that will pay this, because every nation will take the revenues from this carbon tax and will invest them in good infrastructures, and also the low-income families and the smaller companies. Therefore, the ones that have been disrupted, no thank you, disrupted financially by a potential global carbon tax. They ask us, why should China, for example, have a global carbon tax? And we explained in details why should every developing country like China would want to have a global carbon tax. For example, it will have a shift from informal to formal economy. As my second speaker stated, informal economy is one of the biggest problems of the developing countries. And if we move the majority of the companies of the developing countries into a formal economy, there will be a growth of the economy of these developing countries, because there will be a monetary fund in which this company can have access to. And therefore, this is one of the many reasons that we brought to you for why China would have a global carbon tax. And they also said, yes, thank you.
Why should the high-income countries agree to discount?
As I stated again, in our model, there are revenues. Revenues there are from any type of taxation, and every nation will bring the revenues where they are more needed. Of course, in developing countries, they are more needed to companies, because this is what can bring the economic growth.
Thank you for your question. And they also said that thanks in our model there wouldn't be a change in the attitude of customers. This is false. Why? Because, of course, due to this tax being a regressive tax, even though it's put on the production of the goods that have a high emission of carbon, it will also have a higher price for the goods. And thanks to the revenues, the lower income families wouldn't have this problem of the price increase because they will have incentives. And why there should be a change of attitude from the customers? Because obviously they will want to pay for things that cost less. Therefore, they will buy things that have been produced with less carbon emission, and therefore there will be an important move toward what is a sustainable economy. Now I would like to go to my second point, that is agreement. They said that there is no way that all countries, or at least the majority of countries, can agree on a global carbon tax because in the COPs they didn't agree on that. I don't know if you're aware that in the COPs 197 countries participated. Therefore, the problem is not the number of agreements, but it's the fact that COPs, because are an accord and not a tax or a law, there cannot be consequences. And as we stated before, there are consequences in our model. Therefore, this is a positive value for our model and for a global carbon tax general. They also said that there couldn't be a global carbon tax or a global tax in general because there has not been precedent. That is truly false because in 2021 has been introduced the first global tax, that is the global minimum tax. And they also said that Australia tried to put a global tax, and that statement is completely false. How can a single state put a global carbon tax? That is unthinkable. No, thank you. And now I would like to go to my third and final point, that is fairness in regard of politics. They said that our model doesn't meet the need of everyone. That statement is false. Why? Because our model is based on fairness. Therefore, it will meet the needs of everyone because this tax is not a number that is equal to everyone, but it depends on the bill of the countries, the need of the country, their possibility to pay, the emission that they have. Therefore, it's the most fair tax that you can have in a world. And they also said that ETS now are put in a local level, but they can be expanded in other countries. So you basically said that we need a system that is expanded to other countries. Therefore, you're saying that ETS should be global. Therefore, why not have a global carbon tax that is fair? In contrast with the ETS that it's not fair and it's based on the companies, not the nation. No, thank you. And the problem right now, it's not only the companies, but also the nations. Therefore, ATS put on a global scale would not have any sense. And right now, I will also say that they tell us that we didn't show data. That is completely false. In fact, we said, for example, that right now there is a European carbon tax system, and this also shows us how there could be also a global carbon system. And thanks to this tax system, there has been a 45.9 reduction in the use of electricity in 1 year. This data is truly important because it shows us how if a tax is exposed to more countries, then we will have more benefits. And also in regards to the three agreements, I asked 2 times if they knew that the problems wasn't the agreement but the consequence, and both times they didn't respond. And I would also like to underline how they didn't brought any data to support their arguments. There wasn't any data in any of their arguments, while we showed many times with numbers, papers by the MITs and other environmentalists why our model works and why there should be a global carbon tax. And for all of this reason that has been now explained, we need a global carbon tax because it would save the world and is the only effective way to save the environment, to bring a fairness, equality in both political and economics development, both in developed countries and developing countries. Thank you for your attention.
Take 15.
Okay. So, ready?
Yeah. The speech
speech is going to start in 3, 2, 1. Dear judges, dear audience, opposition team, I'm Brenda Civilla, and today I'm first going to rebuttal what the other team has said. Then I'm going to reveal the arguments of my team. First of all, I'd like to rebuttal about the model of the other team that basically stated, first of all, they applied the small-scale minimum carbon tax to a global scale, and this is a hidden assumption because they basically saying because it works on a small scale, it will always work on a global scale. Well, these levels are not so connected. Then they said a group of 20 will oversee all, and they said, but there will be equalities. So you're saying that you trust those 20 countries that we have more power and oversee all the other countries. You trust them not to overuse that power. And then they talked about consequences because all the other COPs didn't work because there were consequences. Yes.
Are you aware that in the group of 20 there could be any willing countries, therefore also all the countries could participate?
Yes, I know that all the countries can participate, but you said that a group of 20 oversees all other countries, and then this is this basically puts more power on some countries, and this brings to inequality. They also talked about consequences, and the COPs didn't work because there were consequences. But what are these consequences if you don't agree with the tax? No one heard it. Then they have a utopic model also because they said that there was a minimum price, but they haven't thought about, and they haven't also answered to our rebuttals, that there will be the prisoner dilemma in which a country won't increase its carbon tax because it's not convenient to heat, and so there won't be from this minimum price higher carbon prices, and then the linkage that they talked about, because if in one country the carbon tax is lower, all the other companies will move to that company, to that country, no thank you, in order to have a low carbon tax. And so for this reason, this model is utopic, and also they will be unable to agree because they haven't brought no data about the reason why all the countries should agree. Starting from one point, the environment. The other team has said that the carbon tax will help the environment and reduce CO2 emissions. Our team has shown that there are no security about that because our cap and trade system actually puts a cap in which emissions have to reduce because permissions are set. In their model, we have no security, no thank you, and for this reason, we are not sure that carbon emissions will be reduced on a global scale because we have no example that on a global scale it will work. Instead, thank you. In the EU, 40.8%, thanks to the IISS of carbon emission, has been reduced. And we said, no, thank you, that this will be applied on a global scale, but with respecting different economies. So many nations will agree, but just because it is convenient for them, and every nation will have its own ADS. Talking about balances, the other team has said that developing countries will accept surely because Canada has accepted. Well, I can show you that with the COP26, countries as India or China do not want to reduce so fast their emissions and don't like other countries to say them what to do. So how do you think that these developed countries will accept? We have no reasons why. And there will also be a change in balances because those countries that pollute the less will obviously be advantaged. And so why should developed countries that are the one that produces the most will be encouraged to participate to this global carbon tax? With our model, IISS, the balances won't change, and for this reason, it's more feasible. It will apply. It will be it minimizes the number of political decisions needed to set these ATS, and there won't be a change. It will be more simple to apply in the single nation, because one nation can decide on the basis of its economy. And in addition, I want to bring you the example of Gilets jaunes, the movement in France brought by the carbon tax. There are many problems related to the population. Indeed, the other point we discussed about what was the economy. They said that the 70% of developed countries are not exposed to taxes. And so you're saying that if you impose a global carbon tax, then it would be acceptable to citizens that usually are not exposed to taxes. Well, you answered that it would, because of the investments on low-income citizens by the state, but this will bring to fiscal neutrality. And so, if you pay those citizens, the cost of the tax will be reduced, and so you won't reduce the emissions because consumers will continue to buy those things. In addition, countries, and you said it also, this will solve some social issues, but this will also make economies dependent on this money coming from the taxes. So why would they want to see a reduction in it? With our system, countries are not dependent or nothing. And for this reason, and they also said these investments would go first to ecological investment, then to low-income people. Then they had it also about an international fund. But what are the numbers? I mean, all these investment, what percentage goes to one thing, what percentage goes to another? We have infinite money? I don't think so. And in addition, other countries wouldn't also accept, developed countries wouldn't accept it, because with our model we showed that the developed countries are fear that if they compensate low-income countries for their carbon tax, then that would open a Pandora's box, and so they will never accept. For this reason, our argumentation has showed that instead the global carbon tax is inacceptable for the diversity of interests and economies of the world. And our model instead is focused on each economy taken in particular. Then we've showed that the implementation of a taxation system is not sustainable for many national economies, and in their model we will just bring more inequalities, and then there will be also the problem of fiscal neutrality and the fact that energy demand is not elastic. And third of all, we've also showed that the application of a global carbon tax does not set certain emission targets, while our does. And we also responded to all the problems proposed by a banking system in which you can accumulate, trade and invest, and a border carbon pricing. So I'm very proud to support this motion. Thank you.
8 minutes, 8 seconds. Are you ready for the reply? Okay.
Let's start in 3, 2.
Wait. Okay.
We're going to start in 3, 2, 1. Dear judges, opposition team, thank you for the wonderful debate. Today we're debating about the motion this House will introduce a global carbon tax. So I'd like to start my reply by talking about the main point of clash that we saw during this debate. First point of clash, the environment. So we have recognized a common problem. We are near to a non-returning point, and an action plan must be done globally to reduce CO2 emissions. You have proposed to introduce the global carbon tax in order to
reduce CO2 emissions. But we have demonstrated you that due to the fiscal neutrality that you have proposed, and due to the fact that energy demand is not elastic, your model doesn't bring us to a solution. While our model, we said, that will bring us to net zero because there are calculations on the cap and trade system that we have proposed to you. The second point of clash, fairness. Your model brought problems of climate injustice and free riding, so delocalization. While on our model, we resolve free riding with border carbon tax, and climate injustice is resolved by the fact that each nation has a minimized number of political decisions that have to be made in common. Third point of clash, the effectiveness of this model, of this system, of the carbon tax. It would be impossible, when we have demonstrated to you, to meet all the needs of all the nations. And even if all the needs were met with a minimal carbon tax, then no countries would have interest in increasing it. While in our model with the cap and trade, the choices made by each nation, as I said before, will be not limited by too many choices that has to be done together. Now, following the two main paths, which is the best world we will live in, following your model or our model? In your world, the problem of CO2 emissions is not really resolved. Why? Because we have saw that CO2 emissions in reality will not decrease. The population, as it happened in many countries and we have named, will revolt against a global carbon tax. And then seeing that there wouldn't be economic interest in any country to join your proposed models. So it would be unapplicable to a current world. On the other side, we find our world, in which we have a cap and trade system, in which each nation has its minimum carbon tax, its minimum cap of emissions, according to specific data, according to each national economy's situation. So we can ensure the reaching of the net zero. We ensure climate justice, that was your problem, and then national economies are protected by a global carbon by a border carbon tax. So we are supporting a model that you didn't even criticize, in which we really achieve our main goals, that is save the environment, but also in a way that doesn't affect the nations and the population of the nation. That's why we believe that we shouldn't introduce a global carbon tax. Thank you for your attention.
Okay. 3 minutes, 56 seconds. You're ready. Good time. Ready?
My speech will start in 3, 2, 1, now. First of all, I would like to open my reply speech clearing up about the group of 20s, because the opposition team has not understood what we have said. We have said that we are taking the example of the group of 20s that is present right now, but in our model, this group of 20 could be enlarged with all of the countries that want to be part of the global carbon tax, and this was said by our third speaker, but also our second, and that then all of them could supervise on each other and see if they're actually doing what they're supposed to do in order to get the revenues, which would be the consequences of not respecting the pacts. The consequences would be not getting the revenues, and we have stated this. Now we'll go on to analyze the main points of clash that have been brought up in this debate. one of the main points of clash was our model, and it was stated by the opposition team that it was not applicable, but we have shown that it is because countries will agree because it benefits everyone, and this will also be another point of clash. And also, it was stated that with our model, there is no proof that the emissions would lower, but we have actually brought data that following inspiration that we took is the European carbon tax system. It was shown that since 2019, there has been a year-on-year decrease in emissions of 14.9%. So there is actual data that proves that our model would work, and it would work extremely well. It was also said that our model is unfair, but that is actually one of the main values that our team wants to highlight, and that is the one of fairness, because the tax is progressive. Therefore, it is based on the possibilities and the consume of each and every country. Therefore, underdeveloped countries would obviously pay less compared to developed countries, and it will all be imposed following their economies and their possibilities. Another point of clash was the one of the agreement, because it was stated by the opposition team that no one would agree with this global carbon tax because it doesn't benefit anyone. But we are actually shown and explained time and time again that it would benefit both the developed and both the undeveloped countries. That is because the developed countries have been trying to transition to green economy and green economy for many years without being able to do that. But with our system, they would have the revenues that could be spent on new green infrastructure. And the revenues, we also highlighted that the revenues are handled by the country itself. So the own country with their own revenues decides what they want to do with it, how to invest it. And then for the underdeveloped countries, it will benefit them because of the economic system, thanks to the revenues that they would get. They would really benefit their economy, and we'll also explain this further. So, what does our team stand for? Our team stands for the changing of direction of our world today. So changing direction into green economy, and an action that needs to be taken immediately by everyone, because it is actually very needed, because we do not have time anymore. But also with this fairness, so because obviously you have to recognize the different economies that have been going on in our world, and that not everyone is at the same level. And this is why we think that global carbon tax is not only needed but also fair. Thank you.
410. Okay. Thank you.